Joining us for a little bit is United States Senator Dr. Bill Cassidy. Hey, Dr. Bill, good morning. Welcome back to KEEL. How are you today?
Hey, Robert, I am great. It's good to be back with you.
Let's start here because, you can bring us all up to speed. What is the status of the Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh? Is a vote before the Senate going to happen before the elections? And you had a meeting with the nominee Kavanaugh. Tell us about all of that, too.
There will absolutely be a vote on Brett Kavanaugh before the election for a couple of reasons. One, he needs to be confirmed. The session starts around October 1st. But just look at the politics, Robert. Just look at the politics. There are 10 senators, Democratic senators, running for re-election in states that Trump won. 3 or 4 running in states in which Trump won by double digits. Now, those senators can either decide to vote and represent the folks in their state, almost all of whom like Kavanaugh, or they can decide they want to vote with Chuck Schumer. So I think that just looking at the politics of it, you want those senators to have to make their statement, if you will, before the election. And hopefully they'll vote with the folks of their state.
I was just going to say, Dr. Bill, pardon me, that you listen to Chuck Schumer, and he's saying that the Democrats, one and all, will form a wall to block that Kavanaugh. Not that they can really block it, but they will be a wall against his appointment to the Supreme Court. Are you telling me that you think there's going to be 2 or 3 or maybe as many as 5 defections from that Democrat party line?
For those Democratic senators' sake, I hope so. Because if you look at the popularity of Brett Kavanaugh's appointment and our President Trump in states like North Dakota, Indiana, West Virginia, Missouri, the folks there like Trump and they approve of Kavanaugh. And so if the senator votes for Chuck Schumer, she or he is voting against the people they're supposed to represent and against an incredibly good nominee. I mean, an incredibly good nominee. Brett Kavanaugh, when you meet him, he's incredibly sharp, but he's incredibly down to earth. And even liberals are saying that he should be approved because of his qualifications.
Excuse me, Dr. Bill, when you meet, and you met with Kavanaugh this last week or a little longer than that, what kind of questions, when he comes in, he sits down, you have that one-on-one meeting, what kind of questions do you ask?
You know, I ask a lot of different questions, but for example, he says he's one thing he said is that he depends upon precedent. There's a legal term so that he mentions. And then I said, well, what about the Supreme Court? They just overturned the Internet tax. So why isn't the Supreme Court following precedent? And he goes, well, sometimes there's a change in context and society so totally changed, and in which case precedent no longer matters. Brown versus Board of Education, classic example, but then he wasn't on the Supreme Court, isn't on the Supreme Court now, but he just said the Supreme Court looked at it and the Internet economy is a lot different than when they first made the decision, so now they overturned it and allow states to regulate and, if you will, tax on the Internet. So it was a good conversation.
A little earlier this week, the Senate passed a short-term, and I think that might be kind of important, a short-term extension of the federal flood insurance program. That's good news for Louisiana, isn't it?
It's good news for Louisiana, good news for the nation. Red River has overflowed its banks twice in recent years, so folks need to know they have protection. We need to get reforms through, reforms that continue to make the program more affordable, sustainable, more accountable to taxpayers. But this 4-month extension gives us the ability to do so. I'm working on a package with a senator from New York, so it makes it bipartisan and by 2 different regions, if you will. We got to get something through, but in the meantime, we'll at least have people protected in the short term.
What kind of reforms are you guys looking at? How do you make flood insurance, in this case, more affordable?
One thing we do in our bill is that we, for example, we have $400 million a year going to mitigation. Kind of the old ounce of prevention is better than pound of cure. If we can prevent somebody from flooding, there's never a payment made. And so we have $400 million a year. To put that in perspective, in total, the flood insurance program has put out $200 million in the past, and we're doing $400 million a year. And by the way, all this is paid for, so the taxpayer is protected. But $400 million a year to help people prevent flooding, that's a lot better than having to put your life back together.
You know, you are on the Senate Education Committee, and there's kind of a fight going on, may turn into a huge fight. Who is it exactly? What is it exactly that could cut federal education funds to Louisiana, and what's the big fight about? Who would be for that?
Well, there's workforce development funding, and there's a formula that is used. Louisiana's lost population, or at least lost relative to other states. And so if you just did it based on population, then maybe Louisiana would lose some. On the other hand, we've got this incredible expansion of a lot of industry that needs skilled workforce. And so this is where the need is. And people are moving to Louisiana to have some of these jobs. And so we felt it important to preserve that. Again, folks are trying to cut what Louisiana gets, but I was able to protect what we do get, not for the sake of Louisiana, but for the sake of the workers in our state who want better jobs. And I feel good about that.
Excuse me, Dr. Bill, but you're just one guy. What can one guy on the Senate Education Committee do to thwart us losing that kind of money?
You work hard. You educate colleagues as to the issues. You occasionally say, listen, I'm not going to vote for this, and you need my vote. And this is why. And it isn't about me being stubborn. It's about somebody who wants a better job back home. And by the way, this is the importance of it to the entire nation. And you make the case, and it happens.